Atlanta is the capital and most populous city of the U.S. state of Georgia. It is the seat of Fulton County, the most populous county in Georgia, but its territory falls in both Fulton and DeKalb counties, with a population of 498,715 living within the city limits. It is the 8th most populous city in the Southeast and 38th most populous city in the United States, according to the 2020 U.S. Census. It is the core of the much larger Atlanta metropolitan area, which is home to more than 6.1 million people, making it the 8th largest metropolitan area in the United States. Situated among the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains, at an elevation of just over 1,000 feet above sea level, it features unique topography that includes rolling hills, lush greenery, and the most dense urban tree coverage of any major city in the United States. Nicknames the city in a forest: ATL, the A, Hotlanta, the Gate City, Hollywood of the South. The motto is Resurgens, Latin for rising again, alluding to the myth of the phoenix bird. Atlanta was originally founded as the terminus of a major state-sponsored railroad, but it soon became the convergence point among several railroads, spurring its rapid growth. The largest was the Western and Atlantic Railroad, from which the name Atlanta is derived, signifying the city's growing reputation as a major hub of transportation. During the American Civil War, it served a strategically important role for the Confederacy until it was captured in 1864. The city was almost entirely burnt to the ground during General William T. Sherman's March to the Sea. However, the city rebounded dramatically in the post-war period and quickly became a national industrial center and the unofficial capital of the New South. After World War II, it also became a manufacturing and technology hub. During the 1950s and 1960s, it became a major organizing center of the American Civil Rights Movement, with Martin Luther King, Ralph David Abernathy, and many other locals becoming prominent figures in the movement's leadership. In the modern era, Atlanta has stayed true to its reputation as a major center of transportation, with Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport becoming the world's busiest airport by passenger traffic in 1998, a position it has held every year since, with the exception of 2020, as a result of the worldwide COVID-19 pandemic. With a gross domestic product of $406 billion, Atlanta has the 10th largest economy of cities in the U.S. and the 20th largest in the world. Its economy is considered diverse, with dominant sectors in industries including transportation, aerospace, logistics, healthcare, news and media operations, film and television production, information technology, finance and biomedical research, and public policy. The gentrification of some its neighborhoods, initially spurred by the 1996 Summer Olympics, has intensified in the 21st century with the growth of the Atlanta Beltline. This has altered its demographics, politics, aesthetics, and culture. For thousands of years prior to the arrival of European settlers in North Georgia, the Indigenous Creek people and their ancestors inhabited the area. Standing Peachtree, a creek village where Peachtree Creek flows into the Chattahoochee River, was the closest Native American settlement to what is now Atlanta. Through the early 19th century, European Americans systematically encroached on the Creek of northern Georgia, forcing them out of the area from 1802 to 1825. The Creek were forced to leave the area in 1821 under Indian removal by the federal government, and European American settlers arrived the following year. In 1836, the Georgia General Assembly voted to build the Western and Atlantic Railroad in order to provide a link between the Port of Savannah and the Midwest. The initial route was to run southward from Chattanooga to a terminus east of the Chattahoochee River, which would be linked to Savannah. After engineers surveyed various possible locations for the terminus, the 0 milepost was driven into the ground in what is now Foundry Street, 5 Points. When asked in 1837 about the future of the little village, Stephen Harriman Long, the railroad's chief engineer, said the place would be good for one tavern, a blacksmith shop, a grocery store, and nothing else. A year later, the area around the milepost had developed into a settlement, first known as Terminus, and later Thrasherville. By 1842, the town had 6 buildings and 30 residents, and was renamed Marthasville to honor Governor Wilson Lumpkin's daughter Martha. Later, John Edgar Thompson, chief engineer of the Georgia Railroad, suggested the town be renamed Atlanta. The residents approved, and the town was incorporated as Atlanta on December 29, 1847. By 1860, Atlanta's population had grown to 9,554. During the American Civil War, the nexus of multiple railroads in Atlanta made the city a strategic hub for the distribution of military supplies. In 1864, the Union Army moved southward following the capture of Chattanooga and began its invasion of North Georgia. The region surrounding Atlanta was the location of several major Army battles, culminating with the Battle of Atlanta and a 4-month-long siege of the city by the Union Army under the command of General William Tecumseh Sherman. On September 1, 1864, Confederate General John Bell Hood decided to retreat from Atlanta, and he ordered the destruction of all public buildings and possible assets that could be of use to the Union Army. On the next day, Mayor James Calhoun surrendered Atlanta to the Union Army, and on September 7th, Sherman ordered the city's civilian population to evacuate. On November 11, 1864, Sherman prepared for the Union Army's march to the sea by ordering the destruction of Atlanta's remaining military assets. After the Civil War ended in 1865, Atlanta was gradually rebuilt during the Reconstruction era. The work attracted many new residents. Due to the city's superior rail transportation network, the state capital was moved from Milledgeville to Atlanta in 1868. In the 1880 census, Atlanta had surpassed Savannah as Georgia's largest city. Beginning in the 1880s, Henry Grady, the editor of the Atlanta Constitution newspaper, promoted Atlanta to potential investors as a city of the New South that would be based upon a modern economy and less reliant on agriculture. By 1885, the founding of the Georgia School of Technology, now Georgia Tech, and the Atlanta University Center, a consortium of historically black colleges made up of units for men and women, had established Atlanta as a center for higher education. In 1895, Atlanta hosted the Cotton States and International Exposition, which attracted nearly 800,000 attendees and successfully promoted the New South's development to the world. During the first decades of the 20th century, Atlanta enjoyed a period of unprecedented growth. In 3 decades' time, Atlanta's population tripled as the city limits expanded to include nearby streetcar suburbs. The city's skyline grew taller with the construction of the Equitable, Flatiron, Empire, and Candler buildings. Sweet Auburn emerged as a center of black commerce. The period was also marked by strife and tragedy. Increased racial tensions led to the Atlanta race riot of 1906, when whites attacked blacks, leaving at least 27 people dead and over 70 injured, with extensive damage in black neighborhoods. In 1913, Leo Frank, a Jewish-American factory worker, was convicted of the murder of a 13-year-old girl. In a highly publicized trial, he was sentenced to death, but the governor commuted his sentence to life. An enraged and organized lynch mob took him from jail in 1915 and hanged him in Marietta. The Jewish community in Atlanta and across the country were horrified. On May 21, 1917, the Great Atlanta Fire destroyed 1,938 buildings in what is now the Old Fourth Ward, resulting in 1 fatality and the displacement of 10,000 people. On December 15, 1939, Atlanta hosted the premiere of Gone with the Wind, the epic film based on the best-selling novel by Atlanta's Margaret Mitchell. But Oscar winner Hattie McDaniel, an African-American actress, was barred from the event due to racial segregation laws. Atlanta played a vital role in the Allied effort during World War II due to the city's war-related manufacturing companies, railroad network, and military bases. The defense industries attracted thousands of new residents and generated revenues, resulting in rapid population and economic growth. In the 1950s, the city's newly constructed highway system, supported by federal subsidies, allowed middle-class Atlantans the ability to relocate to the suburbs. In the 1960s, Atlanta became a major organizing center of the civil rights movement, with Martin Luther King Jr., Ralph David Abernathy, and students from Atlanta's historically black colleges and universities playing major roles in the movement's leadership. While Atlanta in the post-war years had relatively minimal racial strife compared to other cities, blacks were limited by discrimination, segregation, and continued disenfranchisement of most voters. Desegregation of the public sphere came in stages, with public transportation desegregated by 1959, the restaurant at Rich's department store by 1961, movie theaters by 1963, and public schools by 1973, nearly 20 years after the U.S. Supreme Court ruled segregated public schools were unconstitutional. In 1960, whites comprised 61% of the city's population. During the 1950s to the 70s, suburbanization and white flight from urban areas led to a significant demographic shift. By 1970, African Americans were the majority of the city's population and exercised their recently enforced voting rights and political influence by electing Atlanta's first black mayor, Maynard Jackson, in 1973. Under Mayor Jackson's tenure, Atlanta's airport was modernized, strengthening the city's role as a transportation center. The opening of the Georgia World Congress Center in 1976 heralded Atlanta's rise as a convention city. Construction of the city's subway system began in 1975, with rail service commencing in 1979. At the same time, it developed new office space after attracting numerous corporations, with an increasing portion of workers from northern areas. Atlanta was selected as the site for the 1996 Summer Olympic Games. Following the announcement, the city government undertook several major construction projects to improve Atlanta's parks, sporting venues, and transportation infrastructure. Despite extra security precautions, there was the Centennial Olympic Park bombing. The spectacle was a watershed event in Atlanta's history. For the first time in Olympic history, during the 2000s, the city of Atlanta underwent a profound physical, cultural, and demographic change, as some of the African American middle and upper classes also began to move to the suburbs. A booming economy drew numerous new migrants from other cities in the United States, who contributed to changes in the city's demographics. African Americans made up a decreasing portion of the population, from a high of 67% in 1990 to 54% in 2010. From 2000 to 2010, Atlanta gained white residents, Asian residents, and Hispanic residents, while the city's black population decreased. Much of the city's demographic change during the decade was driven by young, college-educated professionals. In 2005, the city approved the $2.8 billion Beltline project. It was intended to convert a disused 22-mile freight railroad loop that surrounds the central city into an art-filled, multi-use trail and light rail transit line. The Atlanta Beltline, which is expected to be completed by 2022. Upon completion, the total combined interconnected trail distance around Atlanta for the Atlanta Beltline and Silver Comet Trail will be the longest paved trail surface in the U.S., totaling about 300 miles. Atlanta's cultural offerings expanded during the 2000s. The High Museum of Art doubled in size. The Alliance Theater won a Tony Award, and art galleries were established on the once industrial West Side. The city of Atlanta was the subject of a massive cyberattack which began in March 2018. On June 16, 2022, Atlanta was selected as a host city for the 2026 FIFA World Cup. Sports are an important part of the culture of Atlanta. The city is home to professional franchises for 4 major team sports: the Atlanta Braves of Major League Baseball, the Atlanta Hawks of the National Basketball Association, the Atlanta Falcons of the National Football League, and Atlanta United FC of Major League Soccer. In addition, many of the city's universities participate in collegiate sports. The city also regularly hosts international, professional, and collegiate sporting events. Due to more than 15 colleges and universities in Atlanta, it is considered one of the nation's largest hubs for higher education. Famous people that call Georgia home are Tyler Perry, T.I., Andre 3000, Big Boy, Gucci Mane, Chris Tucker, Ludacris, NeNe Leakes, Kanye West, Ryan Seacrest, Usher, Lil Jon, Killer Mike, Gladys Knight, Jermaine Dupri, Jim Brown, Zach Brown, Kandi burruss, Future, Jeezy, Rick Ross, and Monica. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more informative content about Georgia.